jumping straight back into the action, keeping it on the quarterback theme for this second segment, we're bringing up Tom Brady. Not in any sort of way that he's coming out of retirement or anything like that. It looks like he's pretty happy being part of the media nowadays, and that's where we'll go because it was in one of these media events, you could say, over the weekend with Fanatics Fan Fest that Tom Brady was there along with a bunch of other celebrities and athletes that showed up there, but he actually spoke to Stephen A. Smith on a special edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, like I said, from Fanatics Fest, and the topic of Tom Brady came up. What were his thoughts on Bill Belichick not being hired? Obviously, that was one of the biggest stories overall during the hiring cycle, right off of the bat once the offseason began. A lot of guys got the jobs pretty quickly, and Bill Belichick, for a lot of reasons, a lot of reports and rumors came out as to why he didn't get the job, but still, we're talking about arguably the greatest coach of all time, in my opinion, and Tom Brady shares the same opinion on that as well. To see him not get a job really and be interviewed and just not considered for the job really left me, and I feel like a lot of people, confused around that. But even though he might not be coaching in the NFL, he's still going to keep very busy during the NFL season, as you guys probably know. He's going to be on the Pat McAfee show, appearing on the Manning Cast. I think he has his own podcast as well coming out throughout the regular season. And I know I'm missing one or two more other things, but he's going to be busy. He's going to keep busy just so he's not thinking about coaching at all yet. But he did make it abundantly clear that he wants to get back into coaching, at least ideally next year if an opening is there that he wants to take. And I think that's to nobody's surprise. It feels like he really wanted to coach. He probably wouldn't have left New England if it was up to him, but New England felt it was time for a change. They moved on from him, and Bill Belichick interviewed with a few teams, the Falcons, and how that all sort of broke down. The Eagles were interested at one point, and I'm sure there's some other teams that I'm just not mentioning. But, nobody ended up hiring arguably the greatest coach of all time. So it was a shock to me. But regardless of that, there was a lot of things that came out, whether you believe them or not. Tom Brady also gave his opinion on, Bill Belichick not being hired, but also his thoughts on potentially why that is. Apart from praising him right off of the bat in his statement, calling him the GOAT, and making sure to emphasize the position of just the level of preparedness that Bill Belichick brought to not only Tom Brady, but to that entire team. He made sure to credit him in his statement, but he later on mentioned in that same statement that a little bit of a reason why, some teams might have been put off by Bill Belichick once he did become available to be hired. Tom Brady said, if I would look at any of these organizations who have any head coach vacancies, Bill Belichick to me is a no-brainer. Now, he's going to come and he's going to be authoritative and he's going to have his own way of doing things, and you got to be okay with that. But when I'm looking at a coach to prepare a team, he's an incredible coach, and that was a common point, brought up by reports and a lot of the rumors that you heard throughout the whole offseason, throughout this process of hiring head coaches, that a lot of teams, I think more notably the Falcons and the Eagles, were two of the ones that, weren't too eager or weren't too, just looking forward to the fact that Bill comes in and he'll want to do things his way right off the bat, and that might make these organizations a little bit uneasy, just because if you don't really know Bill Belichick like that, or really any coach like that, to come in and sort of give him the keys to everything right away, it is a little bit off-putting. It's a little bit uncomfortable. And not to say that if anybody deserves it, it's Bill Belichick, right? At this point in his career, who else would want to come in, demand that, and you'd look at them and think, all right, maybe he has a point to kind of do things his way. But again, when you have organizations like the Eagles and how successful they've been, how everything's built up to a certain way, to have Bill Belichick come in and then maybe shake things up, do things a lot differently, and then you don't know how you're going to respond to that, that's a little bit off-putting, right? So you kind of understand that. And the same thing goes for the Falcons, right? They're starting to bring this thing into molding it into a shape that they're really happy with. You know, how they're bringing in defensive pieces, how they've shaped this offense, bringing in Kirk Cousins and everything like that, drafting Michael Penix as well. Maybe they felt that Bill Belichick wouldn't have agreed to that, so that could have been another reason for him not being there. But I felt like there was a lot of external things, and one of them was, you know, the fact that Bill Belichick will want this control. But I think it got overblown a little bit because there was a period in there where I think everybody saw this opportunity to really jump on Bill Belichick, and I wasn't particularly a fan of seeing it. You know, once these stories came out about him wanting and being this sort of control freak in these interviews, a lot of it came from one of the Patriots documentaries over the course of the offseason, you know, really dumping a lot of their mishaps on Bill Belichick. And, you know, that didn't help. Then you get more people commenting on it. And I think Bill Belichick had a bad rap throughout this hiring process that it was a little bit unfair to me, but no one's going to feel bad for the guy that has 6, 7 Super Bowls or something like that. So it is what it is. Now the cycle has moved on, and it is good to at least hear from Bill and say that he wants to keep coaching, and I think he will obviously get one in the near future. But to me, the biggest thing I have to consider now is sort of this timeline with Bill Belichick, right? How much more does he have left, and how much more really does he want to keep doing this, you know, go through the offseason, especially jumping into a whole new environment, whole new team, getting to know the people he's going to be working with day in and day out on a good level where you feel comfortable enough to go out there and compete for championships is going to be an interesting thing. It's going to be an interesting fit on anywhere he decides to go, because you have to look at the timeline and how that fits and lines up with the players, the roster you have at your facilities at your capacity. So that's going to be one of the biggest things. Obviously, if there's any butting heads, if it just doesn't work in some of these organizations, that's going to be another thing to keep an eye on, and how Bill just gets his foot in the door and actually gets the job. But to me, the way I see it and how it all boils down to the timeline and thinking of an ideal fit for Bill Belichick, to me, it has to be with a contending team, right? It has to be with a talented team that's ready to win this year, next year, or at least in the next 3 years, right? Because to me, Bill Belichick doesn't really have another 5 years coaching. I just don't think or see him coaching that long. I don't think he'll be interested in doing it that much more, especially once he's dipped his toe in this media side of things. He's doing a lot already just this offseason as a temporary sort of thing, because he has a career, he has a lane now in media where everyone, you could obviously see, wants his input on a lot of different things. So he's going to have these opportunities there regardless if he wants to come back and coach. But I feel like now, once he goes through this season, he's involved with Pat McAfee, the Manning Cast, his own podcast, and just other things he'll be appearing on. I feel like that's going to influence his timeline and thinking of, you know, maybe I only want to do this for 2 more, 3 more years because I really like this media side of things. It's very beneficial, and it's definitely less stressful, obviously, than being out there and being a head coach. So I think that's going to affect it and kind of affect his decision once he decides to come back, because I feel like he'll want to do it for at least 2 to 3 more years and then really just call it quits. But it has to be with a contending team, like I said. It can't be with any of these teams that are kind of, you know, just getting over the hump of finding their culture, finding their identity, like the Cardinals, the Raiders, the Panthers. None of those teams, like, we won't even consider them. It's more so, again, exploring the possibility of the Eagles, potentially the Falcons, and, you know, that one got a little bit messy with the owner and, like, the general manager and things like that, so that one's at about a maybe, like a 40% or something like that. To me, call me crazy. You guys could just completely flame me in the chat. I think San Francisco, to me, is looking like the best spot for Bill Belichick, and I want to preface that by saying, you know, I like Kyle Shanahan. I think he's a great coach. I think he's probably top 3, top 4 coach in the NFL right now, but with this team at the peak of its capabilities, of its powers in the NFC, constantly being the best or second best team in the conference, this is the perfect situation for Bill Belichick to come in, and not to mention that pressure that Kyle Shanahan now has because he is winless in all these Super Bowls that he has been in. I think he's 0-3 or 0-4 if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to get another run at it again this year, obviously, and he's going to have a good chance to get back there. And now, if you do get back there and say you don't win again, then it gets a little bit messy now with the organization because what else can you do to this 49ers team that's just stacked from top to bottom? And I don't think they'll be able to have, the courage to come back out and face their fans and say, we're just going to run it back. We're good enough. We're going to try again. Because it has to come to a point where, something has to change. And unfortunately, they're not going to get rid of Brock Purdy. They're going to extend him, actually. This whole situation with Brandon and then Deebo Samuel, one of them or both of them are going to stay. So that's great. Christian McCaffrey's there already for the long haul. And everywhere else, it's pretty much settled in. The defense, all those guys are pretty much staying. So to me, if you get really far again and you don't win, especially for Kyle Shanahan, something's going to have to change. And unfortunately, it might have to be him, even though, again, he's a great coach. He's a great, leader. There's nothing wrong with him, but it's just a matter of fact of how this has all played out. And to me, Bill would fit that spot perfectly. Who else would be better to just get you over that hurdle than the guy, again, that has won 6 to 8 Super Bowls already? As much as you can be comfortable in that Super Bowl is what Bill Belichick would bring to this organization. So that's one thing. He needs a talented team, and that's exactly what this 49ers team is. And it's almost like his Patriots teams a little bit, right? Great defense, a lot of talented players on the offensive side of the ball, at least in some iteration of those Patriot teams. And am I the only one that believes that there is some similarity to the origins of Brock Purdy and Tom Brady? I'm not saying Brock's going to be anywhere near Tom Brady. Obviously, that would be insane. But you think of it, late round quarterback, no chance of starting, not really athletic. Brock Purdy's more athletic than Tom was, but they're super smart, quick reads, have a decent enough arm to get the ball where it needs to go, and just surround them with great playmakers, the Julians, the Gronkowskis, the Randy Mosses of the world. Obviously, you have that with Brandon, Deebo, George, Christian McCaffrey. It's a little similar there to me, and it seems like Bill obviously has had success in that setup. And on top of that, the last hurdle you obviously have to get over is beating Patrick Mahomes. And one of the only people in the league on this earth to have beaten Patrick Mahomes has been Bill Belichick with Tom Brady. So, all those things, if they line up as they do, again, we're not here fanning for Kyle Shanahan to get fired, but if it unfortunately does come to that, why wouldn't you test the waters with Bill Belichick, a serial winner, and, keep this train going, bring in a guy that's experienced, again, arguably the GOAT in coaching, to finally get this team a trophy that they deserve because they're too good to not win a Super Bowl with this core group of players. And Bill Belichick, maybe in the far-off future, in an alternate reality, he could be the coach. I don't think that's too crazy to say, but let me know how you guys are feeling about that. Any 49ers fans, opinions on that as well. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking on my opinion on Bill Belichick, but that'll be it for that segment. We have a couple more to get to on today's show, talking about Arthur Smith and his comments that he made on the preseason that hasn't been going very well for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He talks about their offensive struggles and also the two quarterbacks over the last 2 preseason games. So we're going to get to that once we return from this quick break.
Look